Welcome to Debt Free in 30, where every week we take 30 minutes and talk to industry experts about debt, money, and personal finance. I'm Doug Hoyes. There are lots of ways to deal with debt, and today we're going to talk about one of them, so let's welcome in my guest. Who are you? What do you do? And where do you work?
My name is Heather Cudmore. I work for a company called Carizon Family and Community Services, and I'm the manager of Mosaic Credit Counselling.
Great. Thanks for being here, Heather, and welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Great to have you. And obviously today we're going to talk about credit counseling. Now, before we start, let me repeat the disclaimer that I give at the start of many of our shows, and that's this. Debt Free in 30 is a show that talks about all of the different ways to deal with debt. This show is not a commercial for any one method, or just because we're talking about something doesn't mean I'm endorsing it or saying you should try it. I'm a bankruptcy trustee. So, not surprisingly, I think if you have debt, you should consider personal bankruptcy or consumer proposal. However, I don't think that's the right solution for everyone. In fact, it's not the right solution for most people, and that's why on this show we discuss lots of different alternatives. So, with that disclaimer, let's talk about credit counseling, which I believe is a good solution for some people and not a good solution for others. So, Heather, give us some background. Tell us a bit about Mosaic and Carizon, a bit of the history of the agency. What exactly do you do?
Actually, there's a whole bunch of things that we get to do at Mosaic Credit Counseling. We can start somebody at a budget. You can come and see me and we can figure out how to manage your money. Maybe it's your first job. Maybe you've separated and you're trying to figure out, can I afford that house? Can I afford that rental place? Do I have to share my residence to manage? So you can come and see us, and we enjoy doing budgeting. We'll look at your income, look at your expenses, and we'll talk about reasonable expenses. What's reasonable for you, and is that the lifestyle that you want? I know everybody hates the word budget, but I like to throw it out as it's doing the things you want to do. If you don't have a budget, you can't do a vacation every year. But if you budget for a vacation,
so it's a positive thing. We're looking forward. It's not a punishment. I want to do things. I need to record where my money's going so I know what I can afford to do.
Yep. We're probably, I usually say what I do is help people be smart about where their money's going. And I guess probably the overarching thing is let's do a whole financial assessment on you. Look at your income, look at your expenses. And when somebody does come and see us, we are going to talk about all those different financial solutions. Maybe it is just bad money management habits that we have to work on. Maybe it is the worst case, possibly a bankruptcy. And you're right, everybody should not file bankruptcy or do a proposal, but that may be that best solution for that person. When you come and see us, we're going to talk about options and then send you home, and hopefully you can make an educated decision about what suits your situation the best.
And so one of the things you do is a debt management plan, which is often referred to under the umbrella term credit counseling. So explain to us what is a debt management plan? How does that work? What do you do? How does it work?
Well, a debt management plan is not a consolidation loan. We do not have money that we hand out and pay all your debts. What it is monthly you pay us, and monthly we turn around and pay the creditors. There's a lot of pluses and minuses of this repayment plan. The plus, I get to deal with the creditors. You don't have to. You refer all the calls to us, and we're responsible for contacting the creditors. Another plus of that arrangement is that the majority of creditors are going to stop charging interest. Everybody knows that, if you're being charged a high interest rate with your credit cards, your minimum payment is not looking after anything more than $3, $4, $5 probably on that principal. So if you can get the creditors to stop or reduce interest, that balance is going to decrease a whole lot faster. Downside of that repayment plan, it will affect your credit rating. And so every time you're not paying those credit card bills or whatever debts that you've got as required, it affects your credit rating. And then the last downside is there is a fee. When we're talking budgeting and money management, we do not charge fees. We try to provide at either a low or no fee for anybody who comes and sees us. But for just general information, we are not charging a fee for somebody to come in and see us.
So let's talk about some real numbers then. So someone who has debt, and what's the typical person you're going to deal with? They're going to have credit cards, bank loans, what we call unsecured debt, obviously. What kind of levels of debt and I realize some people have smaller debt, some people have larger debt, but is there a kind of ballpark range that is the sweet spot for what you're doing? It's someone with 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 in debt. What would the number be?
Actually, no, we probably work it out the other way, that we don't look at what the debt is, we look at the ability to pay. Mm-hmm. So, if what is that amount that you can pay monthly? The person who comes in and says they've got $300 to pay to their creditors, is that something that can be paid to your creditors? Now, we are looking at a maximum of 5-year payment plan. So if you come in my office with, $60,000 worth of debt, I'm going to come back to you and say it has to be paid off in 5 years. That's going to be over $1,000 a month just to look after that. Does that fit into your budget? And if it does not fit into your budget, maybe this repayment plan, the debt management plan that we're doing, is not an option. I'm probably seeing somebody with an average repayment plan of, $300, $400 a month. And yes, can that fit into your budget? Can you pay all your creditors with that amount and still live? There is title in counselor is in my title. Yep. So part of my job is to make sure that your life, the rest of your life, is still being managed, that you are able to buy groceries, put gas in your car. Not that I'm promoting coffee, but, have a little enjoyment of your life. Where's that balance? So, working backwards, can you do a $300, $400 and have your debts paid off in 5 years?
We'll each take a sip of our coffee while we break here. So, if the average repayment plan is somewhere in the sort of $300-$400 a month range, and if the maximum period is 5 years, so you'd be looking at someone with $18,000, $20,000, but obviously someone with $60,000 in debt, if they've got a really good job and can afford more than $1,000 a month, then you can help them too. Now, one of the criticisms of credit counseling is, well, wait a minute, really what you are is a collection agency for the banks, because it's the banks who are paying you. It's the banks you're working for. It's all about the banks, the banks, the banks, the banks. That's what you're really doing. How do you respond to that criticism? Are you really just yet another collection agent for the bank?
Actually, no, I don't think I am, because you as a client are sitting in front of me, and I want to make sure that the options and the solutions that I'm throwing out fits your situation. So I am not going to try to convince you to pay more month to month than you can afford. May suggest another option. We can talk about, again, bankruptcy or a debt management program. Now, on the other hand, if you've got really, really bad spending habits, and you can afford that monthly payment on your own, can I help you get the skills to manage that? And, learn from there. A big component of what I do is the education part, because I want you to be able to walk out of my office better educated, being able to make a decision on what you want to do.
And that's great, because obviously education is something that's important, but education doesn't pay the bills. If someone doesn't end up doing a debt management plan, it's kind of hard for you to get paid. And obviously you've got to keep the lights on at the agency and so on. Walk me through how the fees work then. I mean, I'm an accountant. I like to hear the numbers. How much is everyone getting paid here? So when someone comes in to do a debt management plan, and let's take your example of a typical $300 a month plan, how much is the person in debt paying? How much of that goes to you? What other sources of funding do you have?
I'm going to charge a fee to the client of 10%. So that person who's paying me $300, I'm going to charge $30. And we actually build that into the fee. So if I say to you, you're paying $300, I'm taking 30 of that, and the remaining $270 is going to be prorated fairly out to the creditors, based on what their debts are.
Right. The bigger creditor will get a bigger share than the smaller creditor.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Now I'll tell you, for transparency and on our documents, we have to tell you that creditor is actually supporting me. I get a fair share donation back from them. So they, because I am helping collect, give me money back. I give them a tax receipt. It is a donation back. So, banks, they do get the image that they're the bad guys, but they are actually helping to keep me in business, helping to provide financial education in the community. So money comes back here.
And so that fair share donation coming back would vary with each bank?
It runs anywhere from nothing to, some collection agencies, up to a maximum of 22% with the major banks.
Okay, cool.
And everything in between.
We're going to take a quick break here on Debt Free in 30 and come back and talk to Heather Cudmore about some other aspects of not just credit counseling, but some of the scams that perhaps she sees and some warning signs for everyone. So stay tuned. We'll be right back on Debt Free in 30.
You're listening to Debt Free in 30. Here's your host, Doug Hoyes.
Welcome back to Debt Free in 30. My guest today is Heather Cudmore, who is a credit counselor. In our first segment, we talked about debt management plans, credit counseling, which is what Heather and her agency does. And I had her explain in detail how it all works, who's paying who, the banks are paying, you're paying, there's a bunch of money changing hands. The advantage of a credit counseling or a debt management program, as Heather said, is that you've got one monthly payment, deals with all your debts, often at a zero or reduced interest rate. Heather or someone like her is dealing with all the creditors. You don't have all the collection calls. It's great. Now, the disadvantage, one of the disadvantages, is that you are paying back 100 cents on the dollar. In order for the banks and the credit card companies and the payday loan companies and whoever else is participating to agree to it, you've got to agree to pay everything back. They'll give you a break on the interest, but you're paying back everything in full. Now, Heather, I hear ads all the time for companies that say, hey, we can settle your debt for 30 cents on the dollar. So my question to you is, if I'm somebody who's got a bunch of debt, why would I go to you and pay 100 cents on the dollar when I can go to one of these debt consultants or debt settlement companies and only pay 30 cents on the dollar? That sounds like a better deal to me.
Well, it is a better deal. The only problem with a lot of those companies is they're really pulling your leg. Those are some things that much of a debt settlement is probably not possible. These companies in overall are probably not transparent. They're not going to tell you that it affects your credit rating. They're not going to tell you that what they have you do is put money in a savings account, and once they get their fee, which, is sometimes $2,000-$3,000. Once they get that amount, then they will start offering those settlements to the creditors. And in the meantime, those creditors are not just waiting for your settlement. They're harassing you. They're phoning you. They're threatening to garnish you. And at that point, when you phone that debt settlement company and say, hey, what can you do for me? They're really not willing to work with you. You're on your own, and you have to deal with that creditor.
So if I'm comparing the two things, a debt settlement to a debt management plan, which is what you do, one difference is the way the interaction works with the creditors then. So when I come in to see you, when do you talk to the creditors?
I talk to them right away. You sign papers with me saying that you are going to sign up for that debt settlement or that debt management plan, that repayment plan. I contact the creditors right away. I start making payments to those creditors right away once they've got in contact with me and confirmed, yes, this is where the debt is, and we'll take payment, and we'll stop or reduce charging interest. I don't wait 2 or 3 years down the road. Those creditors start getting money right away. And again, every month when you pay me, every month that creditor gets their money. And so there's consistent money going to the creditors. Major banks do not want to wait 6 months, 9 months to get some type of a payment plan.
So if I came into you and I've got a bunch of debts and you do the math and you figure, okay, we can do a plan. It's going to cost me $300 a month. So we set it up so every month I pay you $300. And how does that work? Am I doing that electronically? How do I get you the money?
We prefer electronically. You can, through your phone, computer banking, automatically put money into our bank account. And once a month, we do a check run, and the money goes out to the creditors.
So if at the first of the month I come in, I sign up, you have to contact the creditors, obviously, to get them to say, to find out if they say yes or no. How long does that typically take?
It usually takes about 2-3 weeks. Again, depending on the creditor, some of are right back, and will say they'll take payment plans. Other ones, maybe take a little longer, depending on the size of the place, the workload.
But typically within, let's say, a month, the creditors have said yes or no.
Yes.
And so the first of the month I come in, I sign all the paperwork. By the end of the month, you've got them to agree to it, so that at the start of the next month is when I make my first payment, or do I make my first payment at the start of the first month?
Usually we have you make your payment right at the start of the month. And so then, if some creditors are a little bit slower, maybe we can get rid of a creditor on your behalf. We can have money go to another creditor and get rid of them. But generally, if all the creditors write back, your $300 minus our fee is going to go each a little to all your creditors.
And are you literally sending money to the creditors on my behalf every month, or do you do it every 3 months or every 6 months?
Every month.
Every single month.
Every month, money goes out to the creditors.
So that's one of the reasons the creditors like it. I mean, obviously they're going to get all their money back, but they're also getting it more frequently. And you said with a debt management plan, it doesn't work like that. The money gets held.
A debt settlement company.
A debt settlement plan. The money gets held either in a savings account or some other account. And then once there is enough money to propose the settlement, that's how it works.
Yeah.
Okay.
And debt settlements are really challenging because not all creditors will take debt settlements. A lot of major banks are not willing to take only 10%, not without some type of a formal arrangement. And, a formal arrangement being a proposal under the Bankruptcy Act or bankruptcy where they're getting a lesser payment. No one upfront can guarantee that a creditor will take a settlement. If you came into my office and said, I want to settle with this creditor, I can't guarantee if they are going to accept that. I can contact them on your behalf and try to work out something, but to say upfront, I can get you a 70 to 90% settlement, there's no guarantees there.
Well, and as I said at the start of the show, I think as a person in debt, what you've got to do is explore all your options. So credit counseling works when you can afford to make a payment each month that will satisfy all of your debts over a maximum of a 5-year period. If it's going to take $1,000 a month to do that and you can only afford $300, credit counseling isn't going to work for you. And that's just the way it is, right?
I'd even like to argue that if somebody wants to do a settlement with one of their creditors, try to contact them themselves. If your situation is really bad, you've lost your job, you may have a settlement from there, do you go on your own behalf to the creditors and try to get a settlement? If you've got a really bad payment history, there's probably a good opportunity that creditor may take that payment arrangement. Number one rule, get it in writing. Mm-hmm. Make sure you have this debt settlement in writing. But why would you go and pay a company $200 or $300, thousand, not 200, thousands of dollars for this type of a settlement arrangement? Is that something that you can do on your own?
Yeah, and I think a debt settlement works if you've got a lump sum of money sitting right there. A lot more likely that they're going to accept it rather than a payment over an extended period of time.
And not too many people in financial difficulties have a lump sum of money sitting around.
Otherwise, they wouldn't be in financial difficulty. Yes. Heather, very much appreciate you coming on the show. We're going to take a quick break and then I will wrap it up. You're listening to Debt Free in 30.
You're listening to Debt Free in 30. Here's your host, Doug Hoyes.
This is Debt Free in 30. I'm Doug Hoyes, and it's time for the 30-second recap of what we discussed today. My guest was Heather Cudmore, and we talked about budgeting and the different options for dealing with debt, including a debt management plan, which is a monthly plan administered by a not-for-profit credit counselor. She talked about the advantages, mainly the collection calls stop, and the disadvantages. Well, there's an impact on your credit report, and there are costs and fees to pay. The key, she said, is to make sure you can afford the plan. I asked Heather if she's really just a collection agency for the banks, and she explained what she believes her role is and what the fees are charged for. She did explain that a debt management plan requires you to pay back the debt in full, so we talked about other options as well, like debt settlement, where you pay less than the full amount owing. Heather talked about the pros and cons of those options. There's your 30-second recap of what we discussed today. So, what's my take on all this? Well, I don't believe there is one solution that works for everybody. For some people, credit counseling is a perfectly good solution. For other people, it doesn't make any sense. I would say the same thing about every other solution. I don't think bankruptcy or a consumer proposal is the right solution for everyone. In fact, I think it's only the right solution for a very narrow segment of the population. Same with debt settlement, same with debt consolidation, same with trying to budget and pay it off on your own. You've got to find the solution that works for you in your unique situation. So don't assume, oh, well, I've got to go talk to a bankruptcy trustee because I've got debt. Yeah, I think you should come and talk to us, but we may not be the right solution for you. We will help direct you to where you should go. Same thing with a credit counselor. Don't just assume, oh, they're a not-for-profit credit counselor, therefore that's the solution for me. By all means, go talk to them. Make sure you understand how it works. Make sure you understand all of the options so you can make an informed decision. That's really the whole key to it. That's our show for today. I want to thank Heather Cudmore for being on the show with me today. I think there's a lot of confusion around credit counseling and some of the other options, so I'm glad Heather was here and was able to help clarify it for us today. If you're listening to this on the radio, thanks for listening. Please make a note of the station and the time this show is on so you can tune in again next week. If you're listening to this in podcast format, you can subscribe on iTunes or whatever other podcast service you use so you can get the show every week. Today's podcast includes some bonus content that we didn't have time for on the radio show. Heather and I chatted for a bit longer. So if you want to hear her thoughts and my thoughts over and above what you've already heard, you can go to our website, hoys.com, and you can hear the rest of the show. You can see the show notes, and we encourage you to leave your comments on the website. If you've got questions, something you'd like us to discuss on a future show, you can leave it there as well. All of our shows are on the website. Just go to hoys.com, that's HOYES.com, click on the blog, go to the podcast link, or just search for podcast. You can read our show notes, get links to everything we discussed, and even listen to the show again on your computer. That's hoys.com, HOYES.com for full show notes. Until next week, I'm Doug Hoys. This was Debt Free in 30.
Thanks for listening. This was Debt Free in 30.